or digging mines there because that's unacceptable. It won't happen. But the only way you can do it is if you create another religion that you have enough Druidic elements to say, oh, but we've created a religion that's the follow-on from Druidism. It's the perfect logical move on.
Step,
right, and you've killed off everybody who would deny you this or criticize it. And you then transplant it to the east so that it appears that it's coming from the east. So the rising of Christianity is an ideological warfare. So that these families could get hold of the land and put the churches and buildings on it. Like we said earlier, they were en masse. These churches and these monasteries were put on the Druidic sites. That happened because they're religious sites. You had to create a religion to do it, and that was the plan that I believe took them a couple of 100 years to work out.
So we have three things here that is happening. First, they get in there and they manage to eradicate the Druids. Then they managed to get the resources out from the area, and they also managed to cover up the original, where the ideology came from day one, basically.
They do exactly what Akhenaten was trying to do in Egypt, which was destroy Ammonism. And if you read in my book the utter tyranny that he did, the desecration of the temples, you see, the forbidding the priests to practice, the rape of Egypt during the 18th dynasty. They picked up business as usual when they finally get over to Ireland. And also Ireland and England is a much smaller place to conquer.
Oh yeah.
It's simply easier. Plus, it's you feel better because you're in the land of the ancestors. You got a lot to win. You can really squeeze this tube. Yeah. But the thing is that again, the people live there. Ordinary indigenous people live there who've been there for thousands and thousands of years before you came. They're not going to like these, what they consider utterly sacred places. These are very sacred places, the places of the Druids. They're dedicated to the goddess. You don't go near them. How do you eradicate those places? You eradicate them by slowly inventing a new religion that in its early incarnation appears to be very similar. Remember in one of the quotes we said that they thought that the Essenes, Joseph of Arimathea was an Essene. The word Essene, Henrik, comes from the old Gaelic, pre-Gaelic, from the old god Essa. Which was the earliest sun god of the ancient Druids, the ancient Druids. Jesus is a later version of this. Maybe we can get to that in a minute. But this is what they were doing. They were plagiarizing the old traditions. So the Essenes wore white, just like the Druids. In fact, I would say that the Druids, the Culdeans, and the Essenes are the closest linked. Really? If people want to look for similarities between all these weird cults, it's through the Druids, the Essenes, and the Culdeans that you find the thread.
Interesting. Okay.
But getting back to this thing about the Menzies, it's very interesting. There's a quote by Barry Dunford. He says that this is confirmed by D.P. Menzies in his clan history. Right. So this is one of the Menzies who wrote a book on his own clan in 1894. He says this genealogical family researcher claims that King Matalanus was descended from a guy called Meanus, from whence is derived the name of Clan Menzies, who was the son of Fergus, the first king of the Scots. Again, apologies to anyone who's not interested in this, but the Scots will, have a handle on some of this, hopefully. Fergus, the first king of the Scots, who, according to the ancient Scots chronicles, originally came from Ireland to Scotland in 330 BC. Now this D.P. Menzies remarks, Matalanus is said to have succeeded to the kingly office at about BC 13. So 13 BC, this character called Matalanus becomes king of Scotland. Tradition says that he has held his court at Fortingall. Remember that famous Fortingall?
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, but the oldest tree in the world is at Fortingall.
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
It's a yew tree. Remember we talked about the importance of the yew trees and that they were even found in the Egypt as being worshipped, and that the yew tree, again, lots of Christian sites are right near yew trees. Well, again, this is the supplanting of the Druidic knowledge. And just as a case in point, that Fortingall is the oldest tree in Europe or the world. Now, in the country of the Menzies, and their old castle there is called Garth Castle, is thought to have been one of his old strengths. He is also the Menzies who is pointed out as the one who induced his kinsman to study the arts of metal mining. Indeed, one of the forms of Gaelic of his name, Menzies, is mine. Like Klaus Mine, right? The name German, mine, which means metal or gold metal. Or mean, like M-E-I-N, right? So here we're seeing something extremely important, because remember, skeptics and scientists can go and study this. Check out that these families were talking about where their land is. And it just happened to be, out of the blue, right, where the gold is and where the mine, where the wealth is. and why Rome would be interested in this.
Mm.
Dunford says that according to ancient tradition, a relative of King Metellanus, who was known as Mansutius, founded a monastic seat of learning during the 1st century AD at a place called Dull, D-U-L-L, a few miles from Fortingall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Dull area, Fortingall area, that we're specifically talking about. Now he says that at Dull was a monastery of such importance and such proportions, it was awarded the unusual title of Abthanedum, right? Abthanedum. This is a title that's given. The monastery or abbey of Dull was of such great importance that tradition avers that it was the first seat of learning in Scotland. Exactly how this monastery and place of learning came to be situated in the Vale of Menzies is not known, but 2 traditions are connected with this initiation. The most recent refers to a Saint Adamnan, who lived and preached at Glen Leon in the latter half of the 7th century.
Mm-hmm.
But an even older legend, recorded by the Scottish chroniclers, attributes this inauguration of the College of Learning to this Mansutius in the 1st century AD. Mansutius was the son and near relation, as we said, of King Metellanus, and he went to Rome. Right? So this son of Metellanus goes to Rome. In Rome, he witnessed the preaching of the Apostle Peter.
Right.
Here's the cover story again, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always about you bump into the apostle.
Sure.
What it means is you took a walk up to the palace of the British and hobnobbed with the Atenists. They're not going to tell you that, so they say, oh, he just happened to hear St. Peter, with his crow's ear,
Sure.
whatever. You want to believe that? That's fine. So he goes to Rome, and he gets converted to the teachings of Christ, and he's ordained as a disciple. Again, the fake story to try and say, I had to go to the East to be converted to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the founders of Christianity. We didn't invent it in Britain. No. We just happened to be on holiday one day, walking around in the streets of Rome, and got converted. And then old Peter says, why don't you go back to Scotland and open a monastery?
Sure. Yeah.
Good idea. I'll hasten off and do just that. And every Christian is going to now accept this.
Yeah.
No question of the power dynamics you see in the mercantile trading that's going on, right?
Sure.
It's all holy. It's all religious. So these crooks, and believe me, the people who are the cardinals and the propaganda due, P2, right, and the whole host of the Club of Rome, you think they're doing anything different to this day?
Nope.
Certainly the monastery of Dull, you see, owned large areas of rich land, which this so-called Saint Adamnan would not have had access to, but which could well have been the original heritage of Mansutius. So another point. Do you conceive of the amount of wealth we're talking about here?
No, I do not, frankly, no.
Right. Templar wealth, as I've got in my chapter on the Templars in the book, will let you know that when you hear these little anecdotes about, the Templars were the first bankers of Europe, etc., and they had a lot of money and treasures. How come? Yeah. And that when they were purged in France, they ended up in Scotland. These are the same people who are in control today, because these were the people who built the cities of the world. They built not only the monasteries, they not only built Rome, they not only built Edinburgh, we're talking about the builders of our Christian civilization.
The universities,
the banks, the historical institutes, the lot. These are the characters we're talking about.
And I guess you also have a lot of money, a lot of gold, silver, and so forth, but also for other kind of resources we can start to industrialize and, technology, high technology, as a consequence of this.
And if you go to these modern technological institutes, and I don't care how shiny and gorgeous they look in the cities, you will always find the royal insignias in the architecture. You'll always find some weird Masonic stuff or a bizarre sculpture that you, of course, as a student, won't have the faintest idea what that means. Start checking into it. Start finding out what these symbols in the cities mean, what they're related to. I found that quote by Dunford about the connection to France, just for people who think we're making this up. In a book, but Dunford says that in the book The Coming of the Saints, published in 1906, the author John W. Taylor says, Mansutius then becomes called Saint Mansu. He's now a saint. They canonize him overnight. We have enough bucks, enough money. So now Mansutius of the Royal Houses of Scotland suddenly becomes Saint Mansui. All right? An Irish or Caledonian Briton, Caledonian just simply means Scotland, for those who don't know. It's the old name for Scotland. He's an old Irish and Caledonian Briton, became the Bishop of Toul in Lorraine.
Right, okay.
In AD 89. All right, so we're talking about the same Champagne, same Burgundian, Templar families.
Sure.
Coming out of France. That's why you see the fleur-de-lis, so many on Scottish flags.
Okay.
There's the whole Scottish tie-in,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
We go into this in the work, showing how all the kings are descended from these characters we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's how you become a king. Kings are rich. Kings are related to these dynastic families. Kings have said the right things theologically, right? They go on indoctrinating. He says that this Mansutius, he says, was a constant visitor to the palace of the British at Rome after Claudia had married Pudens.
Okay.
And I said Rufus Pudens, the centurion, is mentioned by St. Paul in the Bible, no less. He was a friend of Linus, the first bishop of Rome.
The first bishop.
The first bishop of Rome.
Okay.
We're not talking about years down the line, centuries, decades. The first bishop of Rome is a pal with all of these guys.
There we go.
Right. This is the connection that, you know, and when you see the Egyptian imagery, not only of Rome itself, when you take into the fact that Rome is aligned to the ancient Celtic, the ancient Irish sites of Knowth and Newgrange, to the sun doors no less, right? You understand that this is the Egyptian connection to Atenists, because there's only one people who have this connection between Ireland and Egypt and Rome. And he says that this happened. Now he says, after the death of St. Clemens, Mansutius became the first official bishop of the British Church at Rome. What a character. He's bishop down in Toul in Lorraine. He's pals with the first bishop of Rome. And bishop of Rome means Pope of Rome, by the way, just in case people don't understand what that means.
Okay.
The bishop of Rome is the Pope.
Okay.
Right? And he's made, after the death of the first saint, you know, like St. Patrick's era, because this is all happening around this time of St. Patrick also. Let's not forget that.
Okay.
This is all happening in the first wave of saints, so-called. But after the death of St. Clemens, who was the first, who was appointed for England, it's this Mansutius of the House of Menzies who becomes the Bishop of Rome, the Bishop of the British Church of Rome.
Wow. Yeah. How about that?
Elites.
So there's a clear connection again between all of these, the areas, the families, and the timeline even, when all of this starts springing up, you know.
The symbolism.
Sure.
The Egyptian symbolism. We wish we had time more to go in it. We mentioned a few there that the stones of Ireland are covered in Atonistic symbolism.
Yep.
It's proving that they got there. The proof has now come to light. You know, that I'm collating all of this work because people don't have, 3 centuries to research all this.
That's right, exactly.
So I've stuck. We have to. I very sincerely believe that scholars of this age, especially in alternative history, have a job as collators to synthesize, so that you can synthesize lots of information for people to get it in very quick time.
Absolutely.
You can get it in matters of days.
Mm.
You read a chapter, it'll only take a couple of days. You're going to get centuries of understanding.
Mm.
This is crucially important. It's not just to keep on beating to death one area, you see.
Sure.
We need to look at things synthetically now. Who were these Romans? Maybe we've been told a pack of lies. Who were these, Culdeans? Who the hell are these Cistercians that had these salt lines and ley lines all marked out?
Sure.
Who had the audacity to build their temples over ancient sites? In fact, you see, when you really take it down into the deepest level, what we have to understand is, as we said, you can't molest the sacred sites unless you turn it not from a business, but it has to be a religion.
Mm-hmm.
This goes to the full extent of creating. You also need to account for the reason why you've plagiarized the ancient canon of the Druids.
Yeah.
Within the canon of the Druids was a famous god called Issa.
Yeah.
Or Issa.
You mentioned that.
Or Iassa, right? In fact, in Aramaic, the word for Jesus is Issa. In India, they still call Jesus Issa.
Really?
Yeah, Iassa. And even in the Quran, he's known as this. But Iassa is a god known thousands of years before Christianity was ever born.
Mm-hmm.
Iassa was known thousands of years before Atonism was ever born. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the most important gods of the ancient Druids. What better than to create your Christianity, to fabricate this God? And as Jordan Maxwell has also shown, there is no historicity to Jesus. People should understand this now, because it is absolutely understood that all the events that happen around Jesus are astrotheological in nature.
Mm-hmm.
You have this component in the Bible that St. Paul was basically plagiarizing all the old astrostellar symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
How can that be a biography? Nazareth has never been discovered. They've even found that it doesn't exist.
Really?
It was never a place. None of the events or the